For those of you who have not heard, you've probably all heard, I'm Steve Fugelsang, Cybersecurity Program Director at the National Governors Association. Really excited to be here in person. I've met so many of you over Zoom, and it's really just not the same. And delighted to have you here in Columbus. Thank you so much. And looking forward to chatting with as many of you as I can at our reception this evening at the Ohio State House. So one of the things you can't really do over Zoom is the presentation of our nation's colors. And Major General Harris, I want to thank you and the Ohio National Guard for that beautiful display earlier. Thank you. Right on, right on. So I'm especially excited to moderate this next panel at the top of our agenda here on our first day, featuring some truly innovative policy approaches that have emerged right here in the Midwest, including from our beautiful host city, Columbus, Ohio. So I also want to publicize a brand new research paper that was released just last week on this very topic. And you can access that research paper by scanning the QR code on the screen behind us. And it's also accessible from the QR code on your agendas. Fantastic paper. I want to give a big shout out to our senior policy analyst, Casey Dolan, who is largely responsible for that paper. Casey, if you could be recognized. So please check that out at your convenience. And in that QR code, we also have some slides from Wisconsin's program that we'll hear about here momentarily. But please feel free to check those out as well. So back in 2013, Michigan became the first state to sponsor a civilian corps dedicated to cyber workforce development and preparedness and response within its borders, both upper and lower peninsula. And since then, the number of states replicating or planning to replicate this model has expanded to about 15 by NGA's count. And in our research paper, we have a map of those states as well. Many of you in the room are from those states, and I'm sure you'll be interested to engage this conversation. And these states include ones as diverse as California and Texas that have codified their programs into law, Colorado, Hawaii, and Montana that have expressed plans to develop such a program, and Oklahoma, which is currently in the nascent stages of launching its own program. And I believe we have a representative from Oklahoma in the room somewhere. So for NGA's accompanying research paper, and now this panel here today, we want to showcase these three representative states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Ohio. So let's start by having our panelists take a few minutes to introduce themselves and kind of orient our conversation. And note, we'll reserve about 10 minutes at the bottom of the hour for Q&A from the audience. So Ray, to kick us off, this is Dr. Ray Davidson. He is a stand-in for Laura Clark, the CIO of Michigan, whose flight got disrupted on her way here. So I want to welcome Ray, and he's the program manager on a day-to-day basis for the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps, as it's called. So Ray, to kick us off, about 5 years ago now, you may recall, NGA did its first research paper on this model of the Cyber Civilian Corps, specifically about Michigan's program. And Michigan's program's come a long way since. So would you mind kind of introducing yourself and taking us back in time a little bit, giving us an overview of the program's origin and its impetus dating back to Governor Rick Snyder's tenure?
Sure. I want to say thank you for having me. I am really excited to come and talk about the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps. It's been my sort of life passion since about 2016. When I took over as project manager. You may remember, those of you that are old enough, in 2007, the Department of Energy blew up an electrical transformer out in Idaho. And it was a big deal and everybody got really scared. And that was the picture of cybersecurity at that time. Now we have ransomware and things have changed. The whole environment of cybersecurity has changed. But in 2007, that was where we were. When Governor Snyder was elected in 2010, I don't know his exact background, but he's a geek. His Twitter handle is one tough nerd. So he came in and he wanted to do something with the technical resources we have in Michigan, and particularly because we have other industries in Michigan that don't always do so well. So he had a pretty good CTO and CIO. We also had a network provider in Michigan called Merit, and Merit, I believe, worked with Al Gore to distribute the internet back in the day. I'm pretty sure I went to Purdue in the 80s, and I think Merit probably provided our internet service back then. So Merit was there. Merit had hired a guy. They needed to expand their business, I think. Like, I was not on the business board, but this is just what it looks like. They wanted to spin up a cyber range because that was a thing then. So they hired a guy from National Defense University. So they had a group of old white guys who had a technical idea, and they created this group. And over the course of time, they initially founded it to respond to cyber incidents. And that's what we do. We have about 60 members now. We respond to cyber incidents. The question is, what's a cyber incident? In the beginning, it was a governor-declared cyber emergency. And in Michigan, we do have a cyber disruption response plan. It's our incident response plan for the state. The governor declares a cyber emergency when life and liberty, or life and limb are at stake. Let's not go there. So that's pretty serious. And particularly at the time, this was about 2011 is the first time I can find actual mention of it. In 2013, there's a YouTube video where somebody says Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps. So that's the beginning of time for our group. But the response was going to be somebody was taking down power plants in the UP and people were freezing to death. There's not a lot of way you can train for that. Like as a cyber person, I don't know what that looks like in cyber terms, and there was no way to keep the group active. Like we couldn't inspire people to go train because we'd be handing out water bottles and that sort of thing. So over time, we have reduced the level of response. We have a law, the Michigan Cyber Civilian Act, and the Michigan legislature has conveniently defined cyber incident to include the existence of a vulnerability. So you can all use that. In case you're looking for a definition of incident. We can respond to the existence of a vulnerability, which means we can now go out to local governments and when CISA has a catalog of vulnerabilities and local governments identify that they have them, we have the authorization to go respond to that. How we do that is something we'll talk about going along. So I've used up more than my time, I think.
So, Alan, you're CISO for the state of Wisconsin. Were you in office when Wisconsin set up its cyber response team, as it's called? And can you tell us a bit about that effort and how it stemmed from Michigan's work, as well as how the CRT benefits Wisconsinites and the state cyber ecosystem, and any workforce development implications?
Sure. So, my name is Alan Greenberg. I became the CISO May 2021. And I got a chance to benefit from my predecessor, Bill Nash. Bill saw the Michigan model and recognized the opportunity that we could be able to do. So he went over, visited with Michigan several times, brought back a lot of different ideas, applied for some grants to be able to set up a similar model called CRT, Cyber Response Team. He went ahead and formed the group. We are a very self-governed state, so the cities are independent, so we have state oversight, but not direct state control. So he had to literally invent some ways about if there's an incident, not necessarily a governor-declared incident, but a cyber incident. Who do you call? What are the steps that you do? And establish those basic procedures that were there and be able to sit back and form the group. Well, in 2021, we did some reorganization because the environment has changed. Things both in the state as well as the environment around us have gotten different. So before we had just incident responders. So what we changed that to was both incident responders, but we added some things of training and basic skills assessment so that the people who went out on incidents actually had some better background and some better checking for them to be able to deploy and do things. Additionally, we added one with assessments. And with that we knew that this was going to be a coming skill that we would need. And the other one, we established a group called General Membership. And General Membership was one of kind of growing our own talent and recognizing not everyone was going to be an incident responder. But if we could teach them and train them about cybersecurity, even if they never became an incident responder, then they could be able to sit back, take those lessons learned, and apply them to their city, their county, their school, so that we can go ahead and improve cybersecurity across the board. You know, one benefit that I have, and I'm going to embarrass the living daylights out of her, I have a great tactical partner in the National Guard of Colonel Frater. So I could turn to her and said, okay, here's this crazy idea of what I want to do. Can you please go execute and make this happen? And Colonel Frater sets very high standards and then exceeds them. So I have a great partner to be able to do that. If you want to see her, she's the one with the red face now in the blue uniform for that. But the result of all of this is we went from 40 members and we have now 240 and it's growing. And it's because not everyone is going to be an incident responder, but they do want to be part of the CRT and be able to contribute to the state and be able to contribute to incident response.
Thank you, Alan. So, General Harris, there's something distinct about your appearance here on this stage.
Is it the haircut?
It could be the haircut, but there's something distinct relative to the rest of us here on this stage. And who are you? What is the Ohio Cyber Reserve? I thought the Ohio Cyber Reserve was supposed to be a civilian cyber corps.
It in fact is. But first, let me say that when Ray mentioned that there were industries in Michigan that were struggling, I thought for a moment he was talking about football, but then I understood he meant something different. Yeah, you're right, Stephen. Thank you for that. We are in Ohio. We actually learned from our two predecessors, the states that went before us, and we've actually organized our volunteer cyber corps as a part of the organized militia here in Ohio. So by statute, as effective in October of 2019, this is recognized as a part of our Adjutant General's Department. So as we recruit members into our cyber reserve, they go through initial training, they take an oath, and they are actually part of our organized militia. So they are subject to the Ohio Code of Military Justice, but most importantly, they're protected. They have liability protection under our revised code, the same protection a doctor or an attorney who practices in a state emergency would have. They have those protections, and they would have the support of the state attorney general, in fact, if there was a lawsuit or something. So we took we took the military reserve model and we simply added a civilian corps to that. We're organized in 10 teams around the state. This is aspirational, we're still recruiting. But we'll be organized in 10 teams around the state, and we actually have a structure for those teams. So each team will have we have 85 folks. We've got several teams in place now, but ultimately every team will have a team lead, a deputy lead, and then certain capabilities within that team. So we know we've got a forensic specialist in that team, and we want to make sure that we've got an endpoint analyst in that team and a data analyst in that team. So as we deploy these teams, we know what we're getting. They're modular, and we'll be able to roll on and roll off to support the state with known capabilities, again, under a military structure, under the command and control of the Adjutant General.
So, Ray, I imagine an effort like Michigan's MIC3 doesn't just come together overnight, and it's not the fruit of a single agency or department. Can you tell us more about the collaborative relationships that underlay its development and evolution? Specifically, did Michigan leverage relationships with academic partners, private industry, law enforcement, the state National Guard?
In Michigan, we have a well-developed ecosystem. We have the Michigan Cyber Command, which is part of the Michigan State Police, has a lot of forensics capabilities, and they are very open about working with non-law enforcement people. When they go out to help people, they try not to act like law enforcement. So we have a really good collaboration with them because we can show up and help people better because we have their expertise and their credibility. We do collaborate with the National Guard, Air and Army. We are not able to collaborate as much because they do have the well-developed structure, and so since we can't always jump through the hoops that we need to work with the National Guard, we sometimes do separate things. But we do have good collaboration also with the FBI. One of the representatives from the Cyber Command is now at the Detroit office, so we have a plant in the FBI, and our CISA rep also came from the Michigan Cyber Command, so we have a lot of collaboration going on.
So for us across the board, I came into a very good collaborative environment, but we took it a step farther. So among things, CRT is an integral part of this. So we have different statutory authorities within the state, example for our agriculture group, our Department of Justice, our education group, all of those pieces in integrating CRT so the responsiveness is part of them. And what that does for us is the CRT is there first and they stop the bleeding right away. We're working on the more of the proactive piece, but the afterwards, now we have the right people involved if they need anything at all. So whether they need tech support, they need access to contracts, they need access to technology, or simple ones on, a simple example for one of our K-12s missed the window for their annual testing for students. So our DPI, our education group, went ahead and gave them a proper waiver to go ahead and get everything adjusted so they could still complete that. And this gives us a whole approach. So we're there proactively helping and educate. CRT is there for being able to help them, and we're working on that assessment piece. And then the afterwards, the state is there to be able to do that. And we do that across the board for everything. We leverage our different working groups within the state. They are part of all those working groups, and we very much promote. And I will say one of the things that is a great benefit to us is word of mouth. Because of the professionalism, the expertise, the skill, and the helpfulness of CRT when they go on site, it's like a testimonial. I joke with the CRT leads that you never get thank yous in cybersecurity. Usually what you get is, a picture on a dartboard, and they throw things at you because you're enforcing standards and you're being mean and nasty and not letting people do things. That happens a lot. But in this case, they're our best customers. They're going around saying, you need to call them if you got a problem, and you need to join this group. So we don't have to do a lot of awareness because that word of mouth is spreading throughout the state, and that's why we're growing, and people want to be part of this, and they want to go ahead and do that. So it makes it for a great collaborative piece, and the room to grow for us is just, for us, astronomical.
And Major General Harris, how about you in the state of Ohio? How did those collaborative relationships kind of foster the growth of the Ohio Cyber Reserve?
Well, I will tell you, our Cyber Reserve is a direct result of the collaboration by the Ohio Cyber Collaboration Committee, which is a formal cyber collaboration committee which brings academia, the private sector, and the public sector together. And I will tell you, this is one of the most aggressive groups of volunteers I've ever seen. You've all seen committees that meet to have committee meetings. These folks meet, and they literally move the ball between meetings. And so our Cyber Range and our Cyber Range Institute, which grew out of the work groups from the Cyber Collaboration Committee, this idea and the way we established this Ohio Cyber Reserve was a result of the brainchild of this Cyber Collaboration Committee. So Cyber Collaboration in Ohio is why these ideas exist in the format that they exist. And I wanted to just riff off something that you said there for just a second when he talked about the trust and folks coming to you when they realize the trust that these organizations have developed. One of the great things about our structure is, the National Guard over 200 some years has been in the business of building trust. And especially in the cyberspace, we gain trust in drops and we can lose it in buckets. So this gives us a chance to really leverage the trust that the National Guard's built in the community because the Cyber Reserve's an adjunct of that trust. And as we bring these cyber professionals in from all segments of our marketplace, they share ideas and the best practices, whether formally or informally. But most importantly, the structure that Ohio has, first of all, it requires the governor to issue a proclamation to deploy us. Now, some of that's just a phone call. I'll call the governor and he'll say, okay, go ahead and deploy him. But that really helps us kind of create a threshold because one of the laws of unintended consequences for us is when this thing is recognized and known in the cyber community, which it will be, everybody wants your help. And you'll realize that you can't go and stomp on every brush fire. You can't respond to every denial of service attack for every industry. So this requirement to have the governor issue a proclamation to mobilize our cyber reserve really does help us establish that baseline for what we should and shouldn't do.
Thank you, sir. And I want to reiterate that the Ohio Cyber Reserve is going to have a representative here on site tomorrow. So please feel free to chat with them and they'll have some promotional material and that sort of thing. General, I want to stay with you for this next question and come back in reverse order here. Let's drill down a little bit deeper into the weeds. So logistically, what personnel and procedures are required to operate a program like the Ohio Cyber Reserve on a day-to-day basis? For instance, who runs and oversees it? How does recruitment work? Is there a formal application process? Are background checks a requirement? Is there credentialing and certification that's required of volunteers before they're permitted to deploy?
Yes, yes, a great question. And I'm glad you asked it that way, because one of the things that I think has led to the success is we've been very deliberate from the beginning about who we recruit for the Cyber Reserve. We knew that initially we'd need very highly capable, well-trained people, and eventually we could get to a point where we could bring in folks with less credentials and actually offer them credentials as a recruiting tool. But on the front end, you have to have that initial pool of very strong, very experienced, capable cyber professionals to really build this thing out successfully. So yes, we have a vetting process. We have one full-time equivalent, one guy right now who works in my headquarters working on this, and everything else is based on the work of volunteers in the Cyber Reserve. So the standard operating procedures for how to employ them, the credentialing, the SANS testing, all those things that get them in the front door, determine if an individual is going to meet those very stringent requirements, is done by Craig Baker and a team of volunteers that do that work. We put them through a background check, to federal and state. We look at both, at federal and state records. Again, look at their credentials, make them take a test, and determine if they meet the standards. And if they do, then we bring them in and put them through a series of trainings as we build them into one of those 10 teams, depending on where they're located regionally. So I can tell you that their credentials have exceeded our expectations. We have some amazingly competent people and seasoned people in our Cyber Reserve right now, and they really amplify what the National Guard does. The National Guard brings all those civilian skills and capabilities to the table when we deploy them. This simply expands on that and brings that workforce, folks who may not want to wear the uniform but still want to participate in a response and do cool things, because that's really what brings them here, to join the team. So we are really gaining momentum right now. Like I said, we're looking for 10 teams of 10. We ultimately want to build 10 teams of 20 so that we've got redundancy in the teams. And we're close to 100 members now. I think it's somewhere between 85 and 100. I haven't checked today, but we're getting there very quickly, and the momentum is starting to build. And now we're at a point where we can bring on folks who may not have those same level of credentials and offer them certifications, offer them use of the range, offer some experience that they may not have had otherwise. We find that industry wants 5 years of experience generally for a cyber professional when they hire them, and that's tough for a young person to get. So they find themselves in a catch-22. So one of the alluring things about the Cyber Reserve is that we can bring these folks in, we can put them on the range, we can document the tasks that they've done and things that they've accomplished and their experiences, and maybe help them accelerate that 5 years to get to being hired.
Fantastic. And Alan, is it you overseeing the cyber response team in Wisconsin on a day-to-day basis? How does recruitment work, application process, background checks, credentialing?
So we have DMA, our Department of Military Affairs, go ahead and run the day-to-day. So I'm overseeing both the state agencies, private sector, as well as the CRT group. So I've tried to play traffic cop, as we say, try to herd the badgers. We don't herd cats in Wisconsin, we herd the badgers. But for this, they take care of the day-to-day pieces. So when they deploy, they're pulling together the meetings, they're calling together the incident responders. They're going, hey, make sure that they deploy, they go to the site, all the coordination pieces happen, all of those parts. We have a little bit different of a recruiting piece. It takes an email. Send in an email, say, I want to join. I'm going to start out as a general member. And then if they want to become an incident responder, then we go back into the background checks. We work with them on training. We do have some grants for things like SANS training to be able to get that, help them with their certificates, their background, as well as on the assessment side so that we can continue to grow the workforce. And again, by that general membership, we're becoming a more culturally security-aware state across the board and everywhere, because they are taking those lessons back. And we're really creating the next generation of cybersecurity in the state that really helps us. And again, the execution on a day-to-day basis, they run quarterly training. They run exercises. This is DMA running this. Colonel Frater, I'm going to make it turn red again, sorry. Goes ahead and runs this, on the day-to-day basis to be able to take care of it. Make sure that these people are vetted. Here's the standards of conduct that you have to do. Here's the things that we expect out of you. And then actually supervises to make sure that they actually carry this stuff out, and then follows up. So if we ever have an incident, they follow up and say, are you okay? Was there anything, any lessons learned? And then shares those lessons learned so we can share them throughout the state, which in turn makes us better across the board.
And Ray, I know you are the day-to-day program manager of the MIC3, correct? So what does this look like for you and these processes like recruitment and background checks and these sorts of things?
So we have, I am, I think, 3/4 time for the state, and I'm a contractor, so I'm not allowed to speak for the state of Michigan, just so everything I say is disinformation. I have a project coordinator who is like quarter time, who helps me schedule meetings and training and that sort of thing. We don't, with the Cyber Civilian Corps, we were only a reactive force. We are expanding now. I'm envious of what Wisconsin is doing, where everybody can be part of the party. We have a cyber partners organization, and as a full-time employee that runs that. It used to be a local government IT guy who is assembling a community of local government IT people. That's our Cyber Partners program. And he's full-time, and we are actually hiring a junior Andy to help him out. So that's the personnel. As far as becoming a member, you could go right now if you wanted to not pay attention to me, on your internet phone and go to MI Cyber Corps. That's MICYBERCORPS. Please don't add an E. .org. micybercorps.org, and it will tell you about the program, and down at the bottom you can apply to be a member. You probably don't want to do that because you have to, so our process is incorporated into the state's process. We've been doing it for long enough. We did it manually, and it was with an Excel spreadsheet, and we got audited, and it encouraged us. I love auditors because now we have great processes. And we needed to have great processes. So we have an application now where you go and you have to log in, you have to create an ID in the Michigan statewide ID system called MI Login, because in Michigan everything starts with MI and you pronounce it My. So you go to My Login, create a login. Then you can log into the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps site and give us your name, address, and your employment information, that sort of thing. You upload your resume. You have to have, in order to be a member, you have to have a year or two of forensics or IR experience, and we determine that from your resume. You have to go to your employer and try to get them to sign a release that says you can play with us 10 days a year. We don't require that because it's not legally binding. If we tried to deploy somebody and they couldn't go, there's nothing we can do about that. You do have to sign the volunteer agreement, which includes a disclosure agreement, a non-disclosure. And you have to have a background check. But we don't do the background check until you pass the technical exam. There's 5 technical exams. There's a basic networking one, there's a basic IR, basic forensics, and if you pass those, you get access to the advanced forensics and the advanced IR. And those tests were created by one of the original directors of the program. So you pass the test, we do a background check, federal and state, and because the federal background check will pick up youthful offender things, and sometimes people that have cyber knowledge that you really want on your team may have had less than ideal judgment when they were young. And you want a way, if they don't pass the background check, they don't pass the background check. That's black and white. But we do now have, and you can see in the Michigan Cyber Civilian Act, it's been amended. So we now have the position of advisor. If you don't pass the background check, you can appeal to our advisory board, and you can participate as an advisor. We don't yet have the general membership where everybody can be a member, but that's kind of Cyber Partners now. We're trying to figure out how to create the big group, because we really do want everybody to be involved. That is the big value of this, is creating the community. It's the credible community. You know who to call. when it hits the fan, you can pick up the phone and you can call somebody that you trust. And you don't really know that they know their stuff because you haven't vetted them, but you know you can trust them, right? So that's what we're doing, is trying to create a strong community. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you. So to this point, we've heard a lot of common themes across your 3 states programs, but I know there are also distinctive elements, some that you'd advocate states considering adopting a similar approach, that they do likewise, others that may have suited your state's particular circumstances when the MIC3 arose, for example, in 2013. What are these distinctive elements about each of your programs? What makes, if you will, the Ohio Cyber Reserve better? Or if you're too bashful to think in those terms, do either the Wolverines or the Spartans have a fighting chance against the Buckeyes this year? But what are those distinctive elements? And I open this up for general conversation, whoever would like to jump in.
But I'd like to start, and I will tell you, I don't think it makes the program better, but over the long term, we can see already that it's going to be very helpful for us, and that is the fact that we are actually organized in regionalized teams. Because our Cyber Reserve has 3 primary functions: assist. So we're going to do vulnerability assessment. In fact, we're already doing surveys, written surveys, but ultimately get to vulnerability assessment, penetration testing. They help us augment National Guard teams, but ultimately these teams will be deployable by themselves. And the regionalization helps us with that, but more importantly, the second mission set is education. And to have a team of individuals who are vetted, regionally based, gives us a much easier time to command and control who goes into high schools to mentor those teams, who's going to run that capture the flag event for a specific region or something. So if that's something that you can establish as you establish your volunteer corps, I certainly recommend it, because it simplifies things from us from a command and control perspective.
I'd say one of the things you need to do is make sure you're following a statewide approach. North Carolina was up here earlier talking about the state approach, but you want to be able to have that. So in our group, we have the Homeland Security Committee. It's a Homeland Security Committee that sits back and takes care of everything. Cyber is an important element of that, and they put together the cybersecurity strategy, which encompasses everything in the state. So education, training, operations, et cetera, and CRT is embedded in that. And by being able to do this for the focus for across the state, everyone understands what are the different elements that are there and how important we view the CRT effort to be able to tie all these things together. That also ties it into budget efforts, because all of this, it's very nice, but car washes and bake sales do not raise enough money for us. So we have to have that legislative funding as well that goes through this, and the commitment of agencies. And if they can see that big picture of what takes place, that's a critical element to be able to tie that all together for things going in. And then the other part that I would say is clone Colonel Frater for carrying out the tactical pieces. If you have a cloning machine, that would be really good. But yeah, okay, that works. Small fee, so we can help fund other things for this. But being able to sit back and give good, clear execution and be able to partner through your existing organizations, very quickly your CRT will be value added for what you do. And that word of mouth will spread across the board for everyone for being able to see the value of what these people bring to the state and how it makes it better. And it hits one of the, one of our cultural challenges. All the CISOs in the room will get this one. How do you change culture? Your biggest obstacle for everything in cyber is how do you change culture to get security mentioned in everything you do? Having a good CRT team adds to that change in culture because it permeates throughout the entire state. Now people talk about, we have things with the CRT now, they get phone calls for advice. Not an incident. Hey, this is weird. Can you get some people on the line to help me with this? That's an indication of change of culture. People want to come to the table to talk about cybersecurity. And they've helped that for all of the other state efforts that we're doing because it ties it together very well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The budget thing is huge. We started, we started some time ago, and this was the governor's special pet project, so it had its own thing. which was great at the time. I spent some time at an entrepreneurial place called Mach 37 out near DC, where they teach you to be an entrepreneur. And we did some of it was very interesting that we used some of the techniques that I learned out there to spin up essentially an entrepreneurial organization and just get it out there and get it established. So we had a special project, but now the budget has been moved back into the general budget as under the Department of Technology Management and Budget, which is where I am contracted to. And we're trying now to split that out as a line item because we don't currently have a line item for my group. And it's a substantial amount of money. I think it's $400,000. I think you guys have $6 million. And you can read the excellent paper that I highly recommend by Casey Dolan. Where was I going? Getting it into the budget is huge. And then, you know, it really is just about being not even an authority, but a friendly voice on the other side of the phone. I know that in Michigan, I tried to use we have an informal network of hacker-type people in Michigan. It's misec.us, I think, MISEC. And there are local groups in like Ann Arbor, Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, all of the sort of cities around Michigan. They have the information security geeks will get together once a month to drink beer and things. And so these are great resources for members. And if you get them together and have them be aware that there's something going on at the state level where they can participate, I mean, the idea, they want to have fun. I know the first time I went to a SANS class, I was up till 2 o'clock in the morning because it was cool to look at packets. And there are people out there in the States, and they want to do this kind of stuff. So if you can give them the controlled environment to come play, you'll have volunteers. And the thing that we are doing now is trying to expand it. We had to restrict it. We had to have highly trained individuals. We're expanding our training now. We use, because of the pandemic, we're currently using a training from Range Force, which is remote. I like SANS. I used to work for SANS. I helped them spin up a master's, but it's really expensive. And there are other less expensive alternatives now. And if you get less expensive alternatives, you can expand them to more than just your cyber response team. You can expand it to the people that want to be friends in there. I mean, you remember in your organization, there's always the person that knows the IT stuff that you go to find out, hey, do you know how to spin up a web page? You know, those people are dangerous now, but you always have one in your group. So get planting those people all throughout the community, like you said, geographically. I think one of the things we have learned from the pandemic is that help is not coming from above, right? You need to have help locally, like around the corner, and this is the great way to do it. And I'm running out of speed, so.
No, that's quite all right. Thanks, Ray. So kind of our last full round of questions is, what challenges or obstacles has your state's program encountered? And if you are willing to be candid, how might your failures or struggles better inform the efforts of other states that might be looking to emulate this model? Alan, perhaps you'd like to kick us off there?
We'll start on the cyber insurance side of the house. About a year and a half ago, major roadblock. We would show up on states and the cyber insurance people would be like, you can leave now, we're in charge here, go away. And that was an interesting reaction by them. So we approached that from two ways. One, at the, if you will, on the ground piece, for being able to talk to them about our role is to help stop the bleeding and go ahead and be there afterwards for the recovery. You have your thing for the forensic, you know, and the cyber insurance kind of stuff and doing that, but also at the state level of applying pressure from our state insurance representatives to be able to go back and say, look, we've got different roles. You go away at a given point in time. We have to stick around. So you're not going to pay them for the next year to go ahead and do stuff. We will be there. So let's work this out. And between the two, we went ahead and did that. And that's a very polite version of the conversation back and forth. It was a lot nastier for some of those, and I did not know that the horse I rode in on was, you know, in that kind of a context. But that was some of the language that was there. So that was a serious one. The other one that I think was a huge obstacle and still is the fear about money. Right now, we're very dependent on grant money, and we want to find a way to sustain this for the long haul. And we're still working that. I'd love to tell you we have great success and it's perfect. No, we don't. We have some things that we're doing as initiatives, but we're trying to work through that so that if ever the grant money is not there, that we can sustain this operation because it's value added. But how do we do that without impacting other budgets? You know, for everyone who's a CIO or, you know, CTO or CISO in the state, you know, sometimes it's a, you know, give and take. We give you money here, but we're going to take some back. So how do we do this to continue it and be able to do that? So I think that was the second one. And really the third piece, and again, no answer for this, if there's a major incident across the state, all over, how do we deal with that? One of the reasons why we're expanding is so that we do have some, you know, as you said, that bandwidth to be able to handle things. But how do we do that from a planning piece? And that's some of the discussions we're having about making sure we can prioritize and focus in if we ever have a huge statewide series of cyber incidents. How can we go ahead and work that? Love to tell you we got a great canned answer for that. No, we don't. We've got some ideas and we've talked some concepts, but we don't have solid answers for those. So I would say those three are the, you know, the big ones.
He certainly touched on the insurance one, which is a source of frustration for me because at the time when we need openness and share threats and share vulnerabilities across the enterprise is generally when things get shut down by the insurance company. So that would be one. The other that we experienced is, as I mentioned, we wanted to make sure that our initial tranche of recruits for the Cyber Reserve were incredibly capable cyber professionals, and they were. And we get these folks spun up to go out and do vulnerability assessments, and in many cases, the customer wasn't ready to receive what was being offered. At the state and local government level, I will tell you, there's such a you know this, there's such a gamut of competence and capability there, and you know, you've got these great cyber professionals who find themselves, I'm told, in positions where they're, in some cases, explaining the difference between a modem and a router. And that was a real source of frustration for some of those folks because we didn't manage expectations very well on what we got them spun up to do. So we're making those adjustments now, and eventually we'll get to a point where our customers are better able to receive what our teams are able to deliver. But that was a real surprise to me, was how unprepared many of our municipalities, local governments, and county governments are.
Yeah, we had, in Michigan, we had a similar situation. The readiness of local governments, I mean, the way I put it is the bar for adding value is just very low. We also had some highly qualified individuals joining the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps, people with multiple SANS certifications. And when you go out to respond to an incident and they have RDP, a remote desktop protocol, open to the internet, you know, you don't even have to do any memory forensics there. You start way back a whole bunch of steps. And so we had to deal with the, as you say, mismatched expectations. I have had people leave because it wasn't fun enough. They didn't get to go to do really dangerous things. We don't, with the Cyber Civilian Corps, we don't go in and image infected drives generally. We might take an image, a copy of an image, and do some malware analysis that way, but we don't usually do that. We're really about getting public services back up because individual, regular human citizens, I guess, is that redundant? Can you be? But I guess organizations can be citizens now, so yes, but regular humans are affected by this. And so we want to make their lives are uncomfortable. And our job is to make their lives comfortable again. We do have the same thing. We did have, when the Michigan Cyber Civilian Act was passed, I was up at the Capitol I went to one of the hearings. And the only negative remark that we had was from somebody, a service provider in Michigan, who was worried that the Cyber Civilian Corps was going to take his business. And we had exactly that conversation. It's like, we're the emergency room docs. You know, we're going to come in and patch you up and tell you to go to your general practitioner on Monday and get on a diet and exercise plan because you're going to die. So we're not going to be stealing anybody's work. But creating the awareness around what we're doing, we had to expand also to do more proactive things. We had to create another organization because the Cyber Civilian Corps was really well defined to do just reactive stuff. So in order to expand and get the bigger bang, we had to create cyber partners. And just be flexible. I know that I mentioned the MISAC group. So we have local groups all around the state, and sometimes those people change jobs. In particular, some of you remember when Target got whacked? We, in Michigan, lost some people who were important to the civilian area because Target hired them away, and they live in Minnesota now. But they're coming back. So this is a good thing, and you should come to Ohio is not very far from Michigan. You should come up to GRCon, GRRCon, in Grand Rapids in October.
Disregard everything he just said.
Yeah, right. Well, we'll come to yours too. Okay. Invite us.
So, gentlemen, why don't we each take 45 seconds or so? What closing advice would each of you have for a governor in another state who might be interested in replicating this model of preparedness and workforce development and response? And then we'll open it up to Q&A following that.
My first, call me, is what I would say. I'm here, I've said this to these guys also. If you work in a commercial organization, there's always the vice president that goes off to a conference somewhere and they pull up the magazine from the seat back in front of them and they see a cool new product and they come back and they hand it to the IT guy and say, what does it take us to do fill in the blank, right? So I'm pretty sure that some of the people here are going to go back to your states with the seat back article and you're going to say, we need to do this. So when you get to that point, call me. I'll be happy to help. I am trying to do a parallel effort now. This is you are all government people. I am also going out. I've got a talk submitted to not DEF CON, but a conference that happens at the same time as DEF CON. I've already done a couple of webcasts trying to talk to the people that would staff these organizations, unless they're going to be National Guard, unless they got to wear the uniform. But if you want civilians, I'm trying to do my part to rouse the rabble, so that you can then recruit them, so that you can recruit the rabble. So there you go.
A couple ones of reach out to the folks within the different states that are already doing a program. Mm-hmm. Take a look at the different models, figure out which one fits for you. And there's this one line from a movie that I will frequently quote. That, they're asking a wise man about advice, and he says, remember that the ox is slow, but the earth is patient. So keep in mind that at the CRT piece, you will not get instant success with this. It will build over time, and make sure you manage the expectations. But if you take a look at all of us on the journey that we've gone on, you can get there. It is a matter of tapping into that collaboration and your state culture to be able to do this. So you can accomplish this. Fantastic. And General Harris, to close us out in your home state.
I'd say be deliberate about it. Is this on? Be deliberate about it. If there's a way you can get this volunteer corps codified in your state statute, do that. It will ensure that it's enduring. It will certainly ensure that funding comes with it. It's a nonpartisan issue that anybody either side of the aisle can get behind. And of course, when the legislation passes, you can certainly create media events and create awareness of the program and help you with your recruiting. So I would say you may have to go slow in the beginning. Find the sponsors, get the support, but if you do it that way, you'll create a civilian corps that not only endures, but is resourced properly.
Fantastic. There's got to be some questions from those 35 or so other states that are just overwhelmed with jealousy right now. So I see a hand up over here to my far left, if we could get a microphone over. P. Green with envy.
Oh, she's going to ask a hard question.
Oh, good. Keep that mic off.
All right, I'll just talk loud. All right, so just real quick, we've talked talked about instant response, we've talked about vulnerability assessments, we've talked about some of the things that we can do. But what the reality is in the community, and one of you said this, if you don't have the people in the community or at the counties, at the cities, the water plants, what have you, to actually do the work and help them. So what would you propose that that this entity that you guys have would be able to do in terms of that and being able to actually help the communities? Because ultimately we can tell them what's wrong, right? And we can go help them when bad things happen. But in reality, what we really need to do is help them before things are bad.
I'll talk a little bit about some of the things we're trying to do, which is the more proactive approach with doing assessments, getting out, doing security awareness, being able to share data across all of the states. So if we have something that's unique to the city, we make sure we tailor it for messaging out to the city or the county or whatever it may be. That's the first part. The second, when they get on site after the incident response is done, then having that statutory authority group there or that coalition group, like the city coalition group or the county piece, we then bring in the community to be able to help them afterwards. Is it perfect? No. But what it does do is it establishes that we're able to continue to go ahead and help them after the incident happens and be able to continue to work that through that right community.
I think that even if they don't have much in the way of resources, it helps them because it helps them identify those quick wins and at least helps them when they're overwhelmed, especially if they don't have the trained personnel, at least it shows them where they can have quick wins. But also, I think that the feedback that comes back to us, I'll give you an example, between the assessments that CISA does here in Ohio, the assessments that the National Guard does, the assessments that are happening out there by our Ohio Cyber Reserve, that gives great feedback. And if you had asked me what should happen with grant money, this $1 billion, Ohio's piece of it, I would have said, well, it needs to go to state and local government. But now realizing state and local government, just applying more dollars, more stuff, isn't really going to get us much in some cases because they just don't have the expertise to use it. So maybe we need a statewide approach. Maybe we need to develop a curriculum. Maybe as we pass that those dollars to local governments, maybe it needs to come with some strings, some requirements, some standards. So that feedback that comes back from the teams, I believe, is invaluable to help us make some of the decisions that we need to make at the state level. I honestly believe the state's the right place for collaboration. Local government's too small, don't have the resources. Federal government's too big. But I think it helps us with that feedback mechanism to know exactly how we should approach next steps.
So I'll add, if you're looking for an example of how to go beyond the reactive approach, this is not the best way to do it, but it's a website you can go to, michigan.gov/cyberpartners. That's my counterpart, Andy Brush, has a program called Cyber Partners, and that got set up precisely because we realized that there are rural communities where the IT person is probably the kid that did best in the math class because they didn't even have computer science. And when that now young adult, it gets overwhelmed with trying to replace passwords and they get hacked, nobody's going to be able to register their title, their deeds. Things are going to be bad. So we've established a community called Cyber Partners, which is the people that are members are also members of the groups that staff educational support, like intermediate school districts, and also local government. We have the GEMIS group. So we meet with them. We've been out to their conferences, and we'll go out and we'll play, there's a Dungeons and Dragons type card game now called Backdoors and Breaches, which is a way to teach network defense. It's cool. You can play it online, and you can buy it. Go to Amazon. Backdoors and Breaches is $10. You have to have a 20-sided die. But it's a great way to begin to popularize the general concepts around network defense. And we've had 100 people in a room where we had 6 people actually playing the game, and all these people said, "Hey, try that," because you gotta decide what you're going to do, and then you roll the dice, and does it work or does it not? And it's just to have that kind of informal event. People laugh a lot. and they lose not all of their inhibitions, but some of them, and they begin to talk to one another. And that's where you get the connection. That's where you get the ability to pick up the phone, and when it hits the fan, you call the person that you were laughing with at the card game with, right? I mean, really? So creating that larger community really has been huge for us. We have just a varied groups of people that participate in Cyber Partners, and now they're beginning to self-organize into subgroups. So we have what you guys are talking about also. We have subcategories of members, and they all talk amongst each other too.
Excellent. We definitely have time for another question. Here we go, right here, please.
Hi, Maddie Gullickson from the state of Colorado. First, I just want to say a personal thank you to Ray for being such a trailblazer in this area and for listening to my ongoing questions. But this has to do with the SANS mention. They're very, very expensive, so I was just wondering if you could provide some insights into how you've been able to swing grant funding or any other kind of funding to cover that training.
So for us, we're using grant money for the SANS training. So that's able to help us with that part of it. And then there's other creative pieces where we're able to get some free training. And then using the National Guard folks to be self-instructors to be able to help that as they've gone through Cyber Shield exercises and other training that they have, and then sharing back. And then a lot of the volunteers also help teach the classes as well. So that helps us. And we also have the benefit right now in Wisconsin of standing up 2 cyber ranges, one at University of Oshkosh, University of Wisconsin Oshkosh, one University of Wisconsin Whitewater, to be able to start working on our hands-on piece and continue to improve that as we go forward. So all of those things coming together help us.
I would say also there are other opportunities for more reasonably priced training. You can work with, SANS has a deal for anybody that doesn't know this. If you can get 65 seats, they'll give you a huge price break. They market it as a class. They let people attend remotely. So you'll have other people attending the training remotely. So you shouldn't talk about anything confidential. But I think it's like 30%. It's a huge price break. But you have to pay for 65 seats. And we have we're using a company called Rangeforce now, which has remote training, and I love it. It does not have the rock stars that SANS has had, and I was there. I work for SANS. I know the rock stars. But look at Black Hills Information Security, which is run by one of the former SANS rock stars, John Strand. They have a lot of pay-what-you-can training. The problem with that is certification. You know, like how do you validate the learning? But SANS, you don't have to go to SANS anymore, I don't think.
All right, we could probably squeeze in one last question and maybe get at least a single response from one of our panelists. Please, right here in front of me.
Nancy Ramos, State of Texas. I'm curious about equipment. Are y'all equipping these people with hardware, software? Sorry. And how are you funding that, and how are you securing it, and all that good stuff?
Yes, we just got a shipment of computers in today, and as I mentioned, when we got the legislation passed, we got funding with it. So our cyber reserve gets $750,000 a year to resource that stuff.
We could, we don't right now, because every time I think about hardware, I think about configuration management. And we don't have the organization to do that now. So our members are trained enough to know how to use virtual machines and that sort of thing.
On incident response, we've used the grant money to go ahead and purchase CRT kits to be able to go ahead so that those incident responders have kits that they can deploy with.
Great, thanks so much for the question. Thank you to our panel. Gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to exit. I guess this would be a stage right here. And I'm going to step up to the lectern and make some brief remarks. But please, round of applause for our panel.